Today we're going to continue with another emerger. This is one that is a pretty common Michigan pattern. It's also known as a Tiltshoot. We're going to be tying it in size 12 right now. It's going to be tied with some darker colors and grizzly hackle to imitate a number of bugs commonly found in Michigan streams. I'm going to just use a clink hammer hook here. I'm going to go ahead and mash the barb in my vise before I secure it. And for those of you that have tied these before and find them kind of awkward, it's probably pretty common. This is the correct way to put it in the vise. You want the top here to be flush with your tying desk. And that's where I'm going to start my thread actually, I'll start my thread about an eye length in back of the eye. And what that does is that allows me not to go beyond that. I want the very front of the abdomen to be right here and the head to be between the hook eye and where my thread is. So start there. We'll take a length of the Z yarn and we're going to split it. And how I do that is I just put scissors right in the middle, and that creates kind of a natural partition right there. And then I just peel half, put it on my desk for the next fly. So I tie that in. It's going to be kind of straggly here at the front, and I'm not going to really worry about that. But I'm going to make spiral wraps all the way down the hook shank. And a good question is where to end this. And on all of my clink hammers, I look at the hook point for reference. I don't go beyond that on the hook shank. I end just almost directly across from it. So that's where I'm going to stop, and I'll take my scissors and I'll cut the excess off, and then I'll make open spiral wraps back to the front. That's when I just lift up this excess yarn and snip it off close. I take a couple strands, barbs of cinnamon tip turkey feather, cut it free. This is probably the most common. I'd say there's probably 6-7 fibers here, and I trim the tips off because they're pretty brittle, and I'll tie that in starting where I left off, and I'll just once again make some spiral wraps. And what that does, that builds a nice smooth place. I'll move my thread back up. Builds a nice smooth place for that turkey to lay down, and it's a nice uniform size too. So we'll get that kind of a nice taper as we move up. I'm just making touching wraps until I get to the top right there. I'll take my thread and capture it. Snip off the excess. And now you'll notice where I left off. That's right where I left, or it started my thread rather. So now I take some Comparadun. I don't want a ton. I don't want a clump. That's about the size, you hear that, commonly the size of a pencil. And I clean it. I pull the fibers out, discard them, take my finger and brush it. You can also run it through a comb. And then I'll actually put this into a hair stack. Give it a couple good stacks. Now, what I do here is on the fly, since I want the tips of my hair extending rearward, I'll orient this stacker horizontally. So when I pull this out, there are the tips of my deer hair. I don't have to transfer them, I just pull them out and they're ready to go right here. So I want the tips of the comparadun to extend all the way back to the Z yarn right there. That'll give me the proper amount. So I'll take my thread, I'll make 1 loose wrap, 2 medium wrap, and then 3 tight, and I'll pull it. And that deer hair will flare out just like that. I'm not letting go with my left hand right here. I still have the hair. I want to make sure that's good and tight before I let go. So there we have it. We have the tips flared and the butts flared. So I'll gather the butts and I'll make some damming wraps up to the front to prop that up. Okay. The next step is going to be to tie in the hackle, and I'm using some hackle, just grizzly hackle from the dry fly cape that I had. And if you were to measure this out, this is actually size 10, 12 hackle, but we're using it at least 1 size bigger for this emerger, just because once that body's in the water, we need this hackle to float or help float the fly. So it may look a little awkward, but here in Michigan, that's just the kind of the way we do things. So I'll strip some of the barbels out of the hackle, exposing the stem. And then while holding the deer hair, I'll capture the hackle with my thread and make 1, 2, 3 good snug wraps in my thread, and then I test this. This is not coming out. So I'll snip the hackle stem. Actually, we got a couple stray deer hairs there, and that's fine. We'll just leave them like that. Okay, next, since this is a cinnamon tip turkey, and I want to imitate mahoganies or drakes or isonychias, I'm going to use some darker dubbing to dub the thorax. I don't know if you can see it on camera here. I have just a real thin wisp of dark brown dubbing. I'm going to dub a real slim noodle because I want that dubbing to go onto that fly. I want that to be real tight. That way it doesn't absorb a lot of water. So once again, I'll just start dubbing in front, and then I'll actually, with my right hand, lift up all the deer hair, and I'll go on back once. Let me grab all the hair there. Twice. And then I'm gonna put some dubbing on there tighter. I'll return to the front. You can see what that did is it made like a little bulb right here. And that's exactly what we wanted. So I'll finish up. Get that on there a little bit better. Okay, so right now we're finished with the thread right behind the eye. And what this will do is it'll kind of prop up the deer hair wing here. So I'll take the hackle and I'll start making wraps right there. And to capture this, I'm not a fan of capturing it behind the eye. I'll actually go with my thread underneath the hackle as best as I can twice. So I wrapped under, see if you can see, I wrapped under the hackle twice to capture it, and now I'll just go underneath it to trim it out. Just like that. So now what I'll do is I'll grab my whip finish tool and I'll get ready. I'll lift everything up as best as I can. And I'll whip finish right behind the eye. 3 to 4 times. There we go. And then trim my thread out. And yeah, you'll notice there's a lot of hackle down here that's captured, and I'll just trim that out. The next step is probably the most tedious, is separating the butts from the hair wing. So I ever so carefully do this at first, and you can kind of pull the hair wing back a little bit to separate it. That'll leave a nice spot here. And all I'm doing is laying down on top of the butts with my scissors, keeping them separated. I'll grab onto the butts and just with a quick snip, I'll snip out the butts. And you can see there's still a couple butts that were trapped, and I'll just reach in there, snip them out, just like that. I'll take care of my butts on top, make sure that's even. And the fish can't see the top, so it really doesn't matter. But if I've captured any sort of hackle in the process, I can kind of get to those with my scissors too here. Okay, there we go. So when do we use this fly? Anytime there's, I'd say earlier in the season, the larger mayflies into midsummer, whenever they're hatching. It floats real well. There's deer hair. When you go to fish it, dress the hair, the hackle here with your favorite fly floating gel or powder. Do not dress the bottom part right here. This is meant to be in the water. It's going to absorb a little water. It needs to be in the water, while the top half here will float in the film. So we'll fluff the tail out a little bit better, the trailing shuck here. So anyway, it's a great pattern, Michigan pattern. It's actually has been called the Borchers Tiltshoot emerger, or Borchers emerger, to go along with the great parachute and dun imitation. So it takes a little bit longer than others, but it looks really, really buggy. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this, and don't forget to check out all my videos at jnicholflyfishing.com, and be sure to subscribe.